Welcome to Leadership Kung Fu with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Welcome to another episode of Leadership Kung Fu. I'm here with my co-host, Jennifer Long from Own Up in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Jen.
Hey, Sandi. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. I'm Sandi and I'm with Satori Consulting in Toronto, Canada. And we're here for another episode of Leadership Kung Fu, where we talk about leadership as a discipline, as a practice, as something that is ongoing, similar to Kung Fu in that, it's a learned thing over time, and the practice takes time to do it, to get it right. If you can get it right, I think it's ever evolving. But I think we really like the idea of Kung Fu and leadership being sort of synonymous with one another in terms of we're always working toward being better. And so today we are going to be talking about succession planning, because we thought it's something that, we haven't talked about it, I don't think, at all, Jen, in our
No, I think
time.
This is the first time we've really tackled it.
Yeah. And so we thought it was important. So in our research for this, Jen uncovered some really interesting stats that make it even more compelling that we're talking about this today.
Yeah, because basically the end story is your succession planning is sucking. It's just not good. It's not in good shape. You might be the anomaly group that actually does it and does it strategically. But what we're finding is, and the statistics are interesting, right? So 35 to 40% of internal promotions fail within the first 18 months. Right. So what that says is that internal promotion isn't really safer, that poor readiness and unclear expectations are the things that sort of help tank your performance. 45 to 60% of executives hired externally fail within the 18 months. Only 14% of CEOs believe their organization has strong succession pipeline. Only 35% of companies have a formal succession planning process, right? So what that says is 2/3 of the organizations out there are just winging it, just trying to figure it out on the fly when they need a person. 79% of leaders say succession is a top priority, but only 21% say they actually execute it well. And 50%, and this doesn't surprise us at all because we see this a lot, 50% of newly promoted leaders report they received absolutely no training or preparation for the role. This is why there's a coaching industry.
But that's pretty bleak, pretty bleak.
Like half your people have no training. 46% of companies report they have no identifiable successor for at least one mission critical role. 46%. Your most critical roles not ready.
50%.
No idea what you're going to do. That guy gets hit by a bus. What are you doing?
Yes.
27% of HR leaders say the organization has a ready now successor for like the hire. That for the executive level, only 29% for like the people who influence the business the most. And let's say organizations with strong internal mobility fill roles 63% faster and have 2 times higher retention. So when you get it right,
wow,
the impact is massive, but nobody's getting it right. So what we've discovered in kind of thinking about this, and we made it a topic, right? Because it's something that we talk about frequently with other executives, and but it was really eye-opening to see how dismal succession planning really is.
Yeah. So there's a stat that you just gave about people not being trained for it. And then you also shared with me earlier a stat about the dollars that's spent on training.
Oh, yes, 700 and something billion a year.
So 700 and something billion a year spent on training, yet
and no one's happy about it. Yeah.
Nobody's happy about it, and it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Right.
It feels like, right?
Right.
If that many people are failing and they're not ready for the next role, and so it's like, I feel like we need to unpeel this onion, because it's so many
Yeah,
layers
it's
of.
it's an interesting puzzle, and I think the other part of this is it's really hard to lead right now.
Mm,
And so, whatever you've invested in your leadership training, no wonder you're not happy with it because it's harder now than it's ever been. And then
yeah,
if you're not really focused on building the leaders in a meaningful way and no one's ready now, right? It puts you in an interesting pickle.
yeah, yeah. So where do we want to start with this? Like, clearly the stats yell succession planning is important and needs to be embedded into your organization as a strategy, as important as your acquisitions, as important as your finances, everything like that.
Right.
Uh, it's
So, yeah. So, in thinking about how to start this conversation, is let's really start to talk about what are the implications of all this, right? What are the implications of the stats? What does that tell
Mhm,
us, right? And so, the first thing on the list is that succession is treated as an event,
yeah.
not a system, right? And so that's where we talk about is it strategic? Is there a process? Is what are all the piece parts that are how are you
Mhm.
really activating and thinking about it all the time?
Yeah, and so I'm going to add on to that is like who should own succession planning, because I think that therein lies a bit of a problem too, right? So it can't be event based. All of a sudden, your CEO announces retirement and you need to fill them, or your senior vice president of marketing. It needs to be planned for, but who's doing the planning and who should be looking at who should be backfilling? Because one of the things that does get in the way that I see is, well, I don't want to plan for my own successor, because that really is sort of plays into my ego issue that I have. But also, it could also say, well, I'm not going anywhere. So do I need to? Like, why should I bother? Why should I
I
spend
got
the time?
I got stuff to do. I don't need to be
Yeah.
worried about who's coming behind me. Yeah, so I mean that brings up a couple issues is um that if HR owns it, which in most organizations it does,
Mhm.
right? That it feels more like talent acquisition and less like succession.
Yes.
And you're just bringing people in the moment and having to bring them in to onboard, to train, to develop. Like it feels very similar to just hiring people, right?
Hmm.
And maybe if the leaders owned succession and the leaders were responsible for developing their successors
Hmm.
to say, right? It doesn't matter when you're leaving your role, you should have somebody who can do it for you. Because let's just talk about your schedule. Let's just talk about how many times you're double booked for a meeting, triple booked, right?
Yeah.
These are great opportunities for people to come in and be you in a meeting, right? How do they learn on the fly? There is more than enough opportunity to develop somebody. And if you own that responsibility and you're measured on your ability to develop, right? And so I think this is part of the system building
Yes.
is, part of every leader's responsibility role should include the development of their own successor, the development of their team, the development of their people to the extent that they can coach and develop.
Hmm. And I think I don't want to throw um, HR under the bus on this one. I think it needs to be a collaboration with HR, right? And so they need to be at the table talking about it, so that you've identified who's going to be your successor, or maybe there's a couple, and maybe you're giving them, a couple of different projects to work on to see who rises to the top, but always sort of thinking about who it is, but in
Yeah.
collaboration with HR. I think that's a really important aspect of your role as a leader. I think too, from a CEO perspective, so it's easy for the CEO or for higher ups to sort of look at it going down, but you have to think about the board. And
Hmm.
if you have a board, if you're an organization that has a board, what's the board's role in CEO succession? Because they own that, and but in collaboration with the CEO, right?
Right.
And making sure that the CEO is not just picking somebody who looks like them, or the board's not looking for somebody who looks like the old CEO. So again, the broader conversations around strategy and what we're going to need in the future, because what you have today isn't always what you need in the future.
Well,
Right?
that it's not a strategic decision, that it's not actually tied to strategy is a
Mhm.
problem, right?
Yep.
That, especially if you're looking at the top of the organization, you're looking at senior level roles, CEOs, all that kind of stuff, that it should be a strategic decision,
Yep.
right? What are we doing over the next few years? What's this horizon look like? And who's the best person to get us there? And how are we developing that person?
Yeah. Yeah. And even if I think that just because you have succession planning doesn't necessarily mean that the person that you've identified will be that person.
Right.
Right? Because, there's probably still should be some discussion around it at the time. We're not just
Oh,
going
there
to
should be way more than
anoint.
discussion.
We're not anointing people here. Uh,
Right.
but having somebody there that could step in, even as an interim, as you figure things out, that have the skills and capabilities to step in is
Mhm.
really critically important. And so if you're not thinking about it, think about it.
Yeah, which, which kind of goes to that whole mess around skills, capabilities, readiness, and not having treating it as an event, right? That the over reliance on loyalty or tenure
Yeah.
and storytelling. Like we're
Yeah.
all just we're gonna get a list of names and then we're all gonna have a talk about this person. And all we're talking about are the stories of our experience. And the interesting thing about that is, especially if you're in your large organization, if you've only had exposure to this person, this candidate, right? Like 10 years ago in some department and it wasn't good, that is how you see them,
Yeah.
right? That is also a huge bias, which says, I don't believe these people can grow and change, right? Having a bad experience with someone 10 years ago doesn't mean they haven't learned and developed and grown. They got on this list somehow, right? But you don't have a frame of reference for that. And so that's a huge, I think, issue when it comes to when we're in discussion about people and the bias and the shortcuts we use to qualify
Yeah.
why someone should be in a role.
Yeah, bias, and I'll throw a little in at that actually happens when we're deciding who gets more money at bonus time as well. Those
Mm,
stories come in, right? And so I can tell the better story than you, so my employees get a little bit more than yours. So bias is a really important thing to tackle and to recognize. And so a framework needs to be there, right? So clear competencies, clear demonstration of the competencies, clear um,
evidence.
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 Yes.
What is the evidence of the capabilities and how are you speaking about that? And how are you bringing um, a success profile into the role, right?
Mhm.
And what does that really mean? Because I think that's where companies get off track, right? And it's not just even for the role. It's if you're going to create a high potential list, high potential for what?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What are the skills and attributes that they are good at? Where do we see them going in the organization? And should we be putting them on a high potential list and then putting them someplace else so that they get, the breadth and depth of experience, right? So that we're not just tunneling them into one direction. I think there's so many questions that you should be asking yourselves from a strategic perspective about the people that you're moving around the chessboard potentially.
Right.
Uh, I think
Right.
the other thing that comes into play is two things. One is if you're going to create a high potential list, if your organization is sort of the small percentage of people that are doing that, should you be telling people that they're on their list?
Yeah.
Like, Jen, you're a high potential. We want to see you succeed in this organization. We want you to be a CEO one day. Do we want to tell people that? Like their
100% you
ego.
do. Yes, you do. And I think people are scared of that. You want to
Yes.
keep a secret list because people go on and come off. And oh
Mhm.
my God, how do we manage that? And here's the interesting thing, right? Is if you've got a level of accountability within your leadership to develop other people, that that accountability to actually do the work, to coach, to develop, to do the thing, and to also say, I'm doing this because you are on the succession. You are
Yeah.
a high potential. We see you as this. And if they blow it, if something happens, they degrade, they get disengaged, whatever goes on, and you pull them off the list, to tell them that too.
Yes.
Because people want to know how they're doing and what that is. And if they've got ambition, right? And it's not about it, especially if you're doing evidence-based, it just the accountability for it, the transparency of it also helps your level of performance and focus for everybody else, that we're all really clear, what is Vicky doing that's so outstanding, that she's on the list, and how do we learn from Vicky as well? And how is Vicky also developing other people?
Yes, yes.
Right?
And so
It's
the
a virtuous
downside,
cycle.
it
Yes.
is, but the downside, what I hear is people, well, we don't want to tell them because, well, they're going to be happy, but what about the person that sits next to them in the cubicle that's not on the list? They're going to be, deflated and unhappy. But it should be a motivator. It should be a motivator to want to be on the list. So it's really it's the story that you're telling them. You're on the list for sure, and that's great. And this is what we're going to do for you. But Paul, you're not, and this is what we need from you.
Right.
Right. So clarity on what people need to do to be on this list. But this whole notion of being on and off the list, and people come and go and off the list, I think
Right.
is an important notion to keep people on top, abreast of what's happening. And if you're seeing them sliding down, that you should be telling them that, so they can pull their socks back up and do what they need to do. So I
Right.
think,
And everybody knows there's a list.
yes.
It's
Well,
not
is
like
there a
it doesn't
list?
exist. Well,
Everybody thinks
there's a
there's a
list.
list.
There might be one name there instead of 4, but
Yeah.
there's always a list. And and the other part of that is, don't kid yourself. Not everybody has that level of ambition. Not everybody wants to
No.
lead. Not everybody's going to be sad about not being on the list.
Mhm. Yes, that came up in a session I was doing actually last week, where they said, well, they're doing their annual performance reviews. These are new leaders. They've never done them before. And what do we do with the people that don't want to excel? They're just happy doing what they're doing. And we need those in organizations. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a bad thing when somebody's not on a list. It's a bad thing when somebody really wants to be on it and they're not on it, and you haven't told them why.
Right.
So clarity, and accountability and
Yeah. Otherwise,
transparency and all those
they're
sort of stuff.
guessing. I got invited to this program. I don't know why. Why am I here? Right.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yes.
I got a coach. Why?
Yes.
And that's not helpful either. So
So
I
it
don't
sort of,
know.
I don't
Go
know, it
ahead.
leads me to start thinking about training. And,
Mm,
that was a ridiculous stat, how much money is spent. And that was probably a US stat because more money than Canada.
yeah.
But they, but, what type of training are you doing? I'm
Yeah.
such a not a fan of one and done training. So you go for
Mhm.
a half day and it's something supposed to stick. Are
Mhm.
you really being critically thinking from a strategic perspective about what the training that you're doing that will actually impact them and change behavior and change
Mhm.
they show up and change whatever it is that you're trying to change over time? Because
Yeah.
sending somebody to a 3-hour seminar, sure, they'll pick up a tip or two, but it's not life altering.
Right. Right. And tons of content. I mean, I think leaders who've had really good leadership development experiences have this kind of combination of the learning, the coaching, and the real-time experience, like
Yes.
project work where they get to
Mhm.
work on solving real problems, right? We all kind of know as trainers, what we know, right? We know classroom learning is very, very limited,
Yeah.
but that project-based learning, especially, we had good success doing one where we used cross-functional, where we
Mm.
took, we had a room full of leaders and we designed specifically putting people together on a team from different parts of the organization where they didn't really know the people because they never worked with them, right? And then gave them a real organizational issue to find solutions for, right? Some of
Mhm.
those heavier systemic things that nobody really has the capacity to deal with,
Yeah.
so that they had the opportunity to really go through the rigors of the skill development on one, standing up a team, right? Teaming, cross-functional teaming is a huge skill.
Yeah.
And then being able to bound an organizational problem so that they had to come up with 3 courses of action and they had
Mhm.
to have business cases behind those. So giving them that kind of experience is, I think, what really gets the point across, because you have to engage at the level.
Mm-hmm.
right? And they all had to present out to the existing senior team about here's the decision we think you should make about this.
And I would imagine you probably had some feedback loops in there as well from teaming
Every
and
team
things
had
like
team
that.
coaches, and they
Yeah.
had to present to each other, and we did some critical thinking workshops around their work as they came
Mm-hmm.
through it, and it was a 6-month experience. And those kinds of things are heavy overhead, heavy admin to get those things
Sure.
off the ground, but they also have the biggest payback. And so I think there's um, a level of investment that whether or not those people get promoted into anything else, it changes their lives. It changes how they think about it. They change how they show up in their area of responsibility after the fact
Mm-hmm.
is radically different. And
Yeah.
that's where I think it's a lot of effort, and a lot of businesses are like, oh God, we don't have time or money to do that.
Well, a lot of effort and the money piece, right? And so it's
Mhm.
easier to send somebody to a $300 course rather than taking the
Right.
time
Even
to
if
do
we're going to
it.
spend 12 grand and send him to HBR, like Harvard, for an executive experience,
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come back ready.
No, no. So
Yeah.
really, training needs to be a strategy. And I find, well, I don't know how many strategic area plans I've done this year, and training doesn't really, and maybe it wouldn't be to the plan, but it's going to be more of a tactical side of thing. But there's not a lot of discussion about it, just in general,
Mhm.
about let's look at this holistically and what do we need to shore up that next gen or next level or whatever it might be. So if you're not talking about training as a strategy because it belongs somewhere below HR, dust it off and think about that, because I think that that really dovetails into succession planning and what is needed and to get people to be ready for that next role.
Right, right. And I think one of the things is also, we're always looking for how much experience do they have? They've been in their role long enough. We're looking at a lot of this. Um, I would say it's not antiquated, but it might be a little restrictive. The mindset around what are we considering in development, right? We have this kind of menu of what we see as leadership skills.
Yeah.
And I think the skills thing has shifted just a little bit as well. And so to really, you don't really necessarily have to have somebody who's got long experience in something per se. What you want is somebody is who can learn fast,
Yes.
right? Because learning in the moment and learning to trust your team and how you get information on the table and what those discussions are is almost more effective because they don't come with I'm going to do what I did in my previous role and do the same thing because that's why I got promoted. And I
Right.
think that's part of when you're in leadership development is, the Marshall Goldsmith familiar quote we've all heard a million times is what got you here won't get you there.
Yep.
Is how you that skill set is great, but maybe it doesn't apply. And
No, it,
so
it, it, it level sets you, sort of gives you a foundation.
yeah, but what skills it's what do you need to learn?
Mhm.
And understanding what that is and that discussion, which is why when you talk about leaders developing others, some of those leaders don't know what they know. And in some cases, that's okay because maybe we don't want to train them and we're getting rid of that leader for a reason. But that how do you really think strategically on some of the skills that are really critical like now, like sense making,
Mhm.
dealing with complexity. I
Yeah.
think those are more important than your standard business acumen, build a team.
Mhm. Yeah, for
What that
sure.
list is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're ands, right? We don't
Mhm.
want to, team is important. Building team is
Well, yeah, I'm not
important.
saying don't do team, but yeah,
Please.
there's some nuance now that I think is interesting. And the other part is let's just talk about assessments.
Mhm.
Right? Let's talk about using analytics. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
non-biased information that needs to be in the conversation because
Mhm.
otherwise it is
The stories.
storytelling.
Yep, totally. Yeah, and I think so we both like the PXT Select as a
Mhm.
tool to, look at how people think and how numerically savvy they are and where they show up and on sort of different dimensions. Um, And it's also a good way to look at if you have a couple of people that are sort of at that same level and that they're sort of vying for the next level, looking at them objectively on paper as well to say who might be a better cultural fit than the other, and considering the rest of the players, who's who in the zoo sort of
how
idea.
that looks, right? And
Yeah.
so the interesting thing about assessments is not only can you assess the candidate, you can assess the leader, you can assess everyone on the team, you can run a team map, you can see what that's going to look like. Where is this person? So the PXT we use because it also puts a performance model on there. So a job role, you're going to look at how do they perform within the context of a validated thing that says, if you're good at this role, you should fit in here. And that whole conversation also in the context of team. And then I would also say, in addition to that kind of a role fit kind of understanding, team fit understanding, there's also the big five kind of experience where you've got a more nuanced understanding, because the only tool leaders really have are themselves.
Right.
Who is this person? How self-aware are they? What does this tell them about themselves? How do they think about that? Right. And what do we learn from that when we look at that kind of data relative to who we're looking for to be future fit? Right. We're not just backfilling.
Yeah.
We're looking for future fit. And that's what succession should be about.
And future fit is about what we need in the future in terms of strategy. And, the world's moving fast, right? And so there's skills today that the leaders 5 years from now may not possess today that we haven't really thought about. So we need to think about that. 360s are also a really good, there's different 360s out there, but ones that are, we use one from CCL benchmarks, which I really quite like. But again, it's numeric data where you can really see that, the stories that you might be telling about somebody because you're their boss and you love them, their peers may not see the same things, or their direct reports or other people that they're bringing in. And so really sort of dissecting what it looks like from the different perspectives, because again, stories are powerful, but may not be the whole story that you need to
be the whole thing, right? And so when you do a 360, the big five I use, since we're talking about them, is PrinciplesYou, which is a great tool for how you think, how you approach, how you engage with others, and how you're motivated. The other one I use a lot is DISC Work of Leaders.
Yes.
And so in addition to the DISC style, so it gives you an understanding that their preferences around, say, if you're mapping a team, all that kind of stuff, because you do a team thing, but it looks at vision, alignment, and execution, and a model around that, where Wiley did a whole research project around what are all the leadership courses around, what's the big themes that we see here. And so it came into this vision, alignment, execution. It gives you specific skills, and there's a book that goes with it that explains how to do the skills. But it's kind of an interesting look into the three big areas of leadership work. Right? How well I do vision, how well is alignment, and really defining alignment as the conversation you're having all the time, and what does that mean for this person? And when you kind of maybe do a battery of assessments, and you also look at other data, right? Where have they been in the organization and for how long, and what kind of engagement scores are they getting, and like all the other data, what does that look like? What does that person's dashboard tell you? And how do you filter that against, right, the things you're really looking for in your criteria? Because I think that objective data against the storytelling, against the role and the future fit understanding, is where the effort is. That is the process.
For sure. And so, we talked about bias. That can help take away those biases, right? Because you're looking at factual data, and you can try and story tell your way out of it. Not maybe because of this, or there might have been because of that. But when there's multiple data points, it's a really good thing. I don't think we can say it any other than that. Is like, take the time to really understand who it is that you want to promote, and the why, and are they ready, through different selection tools, I guess.
Right. And to not, and when you start to talk about, so when you're defining potential, right, to talk about things like what is the ability? And that goes to evidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we actually seeing? And don't be afraid to talk about what that is. What is the evidence, right? Because that's kind of the storytelling, because I've seen this,
Yep.
I've experienced this, right? What is the evidence of their ability? The other piece are, what are their social skills?
Yes.
The higher you go, the more leadership energy you've got, the more relationship based you are. The more it's about creating relationship, because leadership is a relationship. And how does that person manage that? Do they network? Do they have resources within the organization? Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
How have they built that out? What's the drive? What kind of drive does this person have?
Yeah.
Does anybody ever talk about drive? Right? Do they have capacity? Because leadership, sort of, you have to show up as a leader no matter where you are, because
Yes.
you kind of end up in that representative role. And so that means you've got to have a certain level of drive. And then, of course, we talked about learning agility, right? Is how good are they at the behaviors of learning, unlearning, relearning? How good are they at the behaviors of speed to action? How good are
Mm-hmm.
they at self-reflection? How good are they at interpersonal risk?
Yeah.
Which means I'm going to stick my neck out on something and I'm going to try some things. Performance risk. Willing to experiment, willing to innovate. So when you talk about future fit, those are great behaviors that are going to start to indicate whether or not I can meet the time and place of my leadership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think one of the questions that listeners should be taking back to their organization right now is, do we have a succession plan, a concrete succession plan in place?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if not, why?
If not, why? What are we doing?
Yeah. What are we
Yeah,
doing?
and do we know what our critical roles are?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that when we are putting a system together, we're really pinpointing where in the organization this is going to matter the most, because that's where you
Yes.
need to start.
I would also add to that is, what are the critical roles that we need tomorrow? When I talk about tomorrow, I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about, 5 years from now, as things are changing, right? Who would have thought that cyber would have been such an important aspect of, the day to day now, right? 10 years ago, not even
Yeah.
5 years ago. So
Right. And
how to be,
AI, right, is
yeah,
adding a whole new
AI.
pressure on HR of what are we doing with that and how's that change people's roles? And so future fit relative to how do people manage technology.
That's right. And what's the technology going to look like? And
Mhm.
so taking a real critical stance and look at what do we need, what do we have today, and what are we going to need is going to be important to sort of bridge that gap when you're thinking about building your succession plan and the skills and competencies we're going to need in the future.
Right. What does
Right.
your
So
strategy require, not your org chart?
yes, yes, yeah. Which is, and the other, yeah, org chart's a whole other thing.
We can do our next episode on org chart.
Yeah, stop trying to put names into charts. Just get the roles first.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, yeah, if you're not doing it, you should be asking yourself why, and what is the risk? What is the risk to your organization for not having a solid succession plan strategy in place?
Hmm.
That's going to take you for the next 5 years.
Right. Right. And are you holding people, managers, accountable for
Yeah.
development? Right.
Yes. Who's
Are
responsible? Who owns it?
Who owns it? And how does that partnership? Is it leadership and HR? Is it leadership if you've got a learning and development
Mhm.
organization or an organizational development organization? How is that partnership really working? Because it
Yes.
has to be mutual. It can't just be HR.
Right. And if the answer comes back that it's HR, then the question is how is that working for us?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and
How is that different than talent acquisition?
exactly. Exactly.
Okay. What else do they need to do? Figure out stretch assignments. Be
Stretch
transparent.
assignments.
To have a
Yeah.
discussion about the transparency of the list.
Yes, I think so. Are we telling them? Are we not? And why not? And what's the risk to and the risk not to?
Mm-hmm.
I think taking a look at your training in tandem. So what are we spending all these millions of dollars on in training, and is it doing what we want it to do?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And maybe bring the leaders of those critical roles in right now to help you
Yeah.
co-develop whatever that might need to look like. especially if they're strategic, right? And they understand here's what I know is coming and what I'm not ready for. So here's, and to be frank and open about that.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the key pieces to get in place and to talk about. Because then you can always get into, what are the stretch assignments that we should be offering people, and how can we leverage these high potentials in actually adding value to the business before they ever have the role.
Right. Yeah. Because, I love the ones that you do. It's very sort of a red teaming exercise, really. Right. And I think, you can get more out of people than when they're not in the role. Right.
Yeah. Red teaming would be an excellent opportunity, right? To put them on a red team. And learn because that's the skill set that I think leaders are missing fundamentally anyway.
Yeah.
Is how do we stress test our plans, and how do we do better strategy, and how do we actually make decisions faster that are good decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And not made up from stories or we've done it this way or anyway. If you haven't read the book, the Red Teaming book, it's a terrific book to read.
It is.
As a starting point anyway, to get you thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. That's all I got. What else you got?
I think that's it. I think, succession planning is not an event. You sort of started with that. We started with that. It needs to be thoughtful. It needs to be gradual. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be part of your strategy.
Integrated.
Integrated. And your leaders need to be responsible for who they're developing and, bringing in that whole accountability for what they're responsible for is going to be critical. And so it's owned by everyone, right? It is. It's not an HR thing that once a year HR looks at a list and goes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But it's a conversation, a critical. I was going to say it's a conversation that requires critical thinking, non-bias, transparency, data,
more data. And wouldn't it be interesting, right? When you look at the data and you look at the if you can create a profile around somebody that's data heavy, that has all that information we talked about earlier, and do it blind, no names, and see who comes to the top just by looking at the objective information. Yeah, because I think that also will surprise you on who's capable of what, that you don't, that, if you're holding a bias against this person.
Yeah. And that's a great point. So succession planning, I think we probably could talk about this for a lot longer, but I think we've given a lot of our listeners a lot to think about. It's, but integrate and good luck.
Systematize. All right. Good luck on that. Let us know how it goes. Let us know if you got questions. Give us some comments, give us feedback. Love to hear that. Share the podcast with whoever you think needs it. And thanks for listening.
All right. See you again.
See you again soon.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI Consulting INC.ca. And you can check out Jen's website at accountabilityatwork.com. If you like what you hear, let us know by leaving a review on your favorite listening platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.